Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
March 15, 2021, the Lanyards Ready edition. And we begin with that story. In the Wall Street Journal, trade shows are plotting a comeback. Will the $11 billion industry ever make it back from where it was pre-COVID? As mass temperature checks and COVID-19 tests will be mandatory going forward, the trade show is slowly coming back to life. A full recovery, though, is not expected for 2 years, and many questions now face organizers and businesses that rely on lanyard-clad masses. How quickly can shows, which require months of planning, come back on the calendar? Are attendees ready to crowd into expo halls with hotel bars and strangers again? For those in the compliance space, you can think of the SCCE and its vendor room. You can think of the same at Compliance Week, or really any other large conference. Obviously, the ACI FCPA National Conference is a huge event, and what's going to become of those? Will they try and make a comeback this year? Will they wait until we're more safe? What about all those non-vaxxer Republicans who refuse to get vaccines? Are you going to have to show that you've had a vaccine? Lots of questions for that industry. The New York Times reports that 7 years after Credit-Suisse promised federal prosecutors it would stop helping rich Americans hide their wealth from tax collectors, a whistleblower is contending that it continues to do just that, raising the possibilities that the Swiss bank could face a fresh investigation and cheap financial penalties. The allegations laid out in documents last week sent to the DOJ and IRS were made by a former Credit-Suisse employee turned whistleblower. The former employee said that the bank continued to hide assets for its clients long after it promised to close out those accounts. The whistleblower, whose identity is unknown, is contending that Credit-Suisse lied to prosecutors, the IRS, and members of Congress during their years-long inquiry into how Swiss banks helped Americans defraud the U.S. government. This original investigation led to a settlement in May 2014 between Credit-Suisse, and the Swiss bank pled guilty. It was fined $2.6 billion, but avoided higher fines because it vowed to the DOJ and a Senate panel that it had stopped the practice and would close any and all accounts. It also said that it would help the DOJ going forward. Apparently, at least according to this whistleblower, none of this was true, and the Times has seen documents which indicate that the bank continued to hide its assets. This is obviously very bad for Credit-Suisse, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out going forward. Next up, the Financial Conduct Authority, UK's top in sanctions enforcer this week, will provide more guidance on or clarification on self-reporting and suggests the agency may adopt a more aggressive enforcement. The UK Treasury unit in charge of carrying out sanctions released guidance outlining the enforcement powers and how it will use them. So interesting from the UK authorities, and something that every compliance practitioner needs to take a look at going forward. And our final story is LIBOR. As many companies are still working on a LIBOR changeover, regulators are pressuring Wall Street to do away with the LIBOR framework by the end of the year, and companies are making the switch. So is your company ready for LIBOR to go away? I hope so. I don't know what you're going to replace it with, but hopefully between companies and the regulators, we can come up with a standard less subject to manipulation going forward. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.